Hello everyone, top 5 Warframes to take into Steel Path, maybe as a new player, maybe as a player that just got bored of some certain Warframes inside of Steel Path. And these 5 Warframes are going to be mainly Warframes that I take into Steel Path. I have first of all no issue of surviving, killing enemies, and definitely no issues in killing acolytes and also Thrax units, because, you know, I always test it out on Construction Survival just to make it more difficult. So, first of all, I do have one disclaimer. I will be using the same set of weapons on each of the Warframes. Only on the one Warframe I don't bring a primary, but that's basically not really that impactful. I do have videos on all 3 of the weapons that I'm picking, so that's going to be the Strun Prime, or I guess the Incarnate Strun Prime, the Spore Laser Kit Gun, and also the Glaive Prime. I'm using Madurai only because, of course, of the, what are they called again? The Thrax units, yes. But you can choose whichever focus school you want to, and I'm of course using the Smida Kavat with the Charm buff. A Panzer Profiler would be pretty good, but it's, you know, to each their own, as they say. First of all, as I said, this is my list. One Warframe that a lot of people expect on this list is Octavia. Yes, Octavia is extremely easy inside of Steel Path, and you can basically no brain throughout Steel Path. I'm a person that actually loves using my brain cells inside of course, video games. Of course, no offense to the people that don't, but nonetheless, Octavia is pretty much excluded out of the list. Now, sometimes I don't love using my brain cells, sometimes, but of course, Octavia is the pretty obvious pick. Nonetheless, as I said, my list, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, well, then you don't, I guess. But pretty much that is it. The mod setups I'll show you real quick. So this is for the Strun Incarnate. Then we have, of course, the evolutions. I'm going to quickly go over just so you can pause the video where you want to. And then the Spore Laser Kit Gun. This is the build that I use for the Spore Laser Kit Gun, even though I don't have a Arcane here. Just now noticed that. And then the Glaive Prime. Here you go. So these are the builds. Of course, the Warframe, this is not one of the Warframes, just keep that in mind. This is just for some fan service for you guys, just so you have some juicy booty to look at, even though the chat's in the way. There you go. So yeah, let's get on with the top 5. At number 5, just so I'm a little bit ironic right at the beginning of the video, we're gonna be using a no-brain Warframe. Yes, surprisingly enough, a smart gaming weasel, nonetheless, Revenant Prime. Revenant Prime is our first Warframe, and the Warframe that I use in 99% of my videos for testing out weapons and actually showcasing weapons, because this Warframe is just incredibly easy inside of Steel Path. You have to be somewhat deficient in certain departments to not be able to use him, because all you basically need to do is just keep up your second ability, Mesmer Skin, and that's basically it. That's not that hard to do. Nonetheless, of course, Enthrall, his first ability, is pretty good at crowd controlling, you know, basically turning enemies into your allies, and as I said, crowd controlling a little bit. Reaving through those enemies is basically gonna insta-kill them, so that's amazing. And I do have Roar subsumed onto my 4th ability, because Dance Macabre is his 4th ability, which is kind of useless in Steel Path, to be perfectly honest with you. Nonetheless, Roar is pretty good. Eclipse or Zato's Whisper is one of the 2 other options. Nonetheless, the build looks like this. It is basically a full strength build. Why do I have Umbral, Vitality, Fiber, and Intensify? You might be asking. That is because of course, the style resistance that you get, or I guess the set bonus that you get, increasing my power strength up to 405, Arcane Rage for primary damage, and of course Molt Augmented for that juicy power strength. I do have all Archon Swords fully filled up, 2 for casting speed and 3 for power strength, one of them being a Tau forged one. Now, Mesmer Skin is basically the only use for Revenant in my honest opinion. You can of course equip the augment mod Mesmer Shield that is gonna give it to your allies, which is pretty good, and you can utilize him for better crowd controlling and stuff like that, but honestly, Revenant is just a no-brain Mesmer Skin tanky Warframe. Just go in, kill enemies, and that's basically it. You don't have to use your brain with this Warframe. Now, killing wise, sadly your weapons have to do the business, but if you're using anywhere near the weapons that I'm using, you're pretty much set. Pick a good AoE weapon, like the weapons that I've chosen, maybe the Tenon Orca Plasmor, maybe the Kua Brahma, if it's still Revenant. I haven't used the Kua Brahma in ages, but nonetheless, Latron and Cornin, nonetheless. as I said, Revenant Prime, my favorite Warframe for definitely no-braining through Steel Path. But we are moving to number 4. And at number 4, we have an interesting entry. It is going to be Mesa Prime. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, he's probably gonna use something like shield gating. Actually, no. There is basically only one Warframe in this list that's gonna be using shield gating, and with Mesa, that is definitely not it. We are going into the completely different route of using Pillage, gaining over shields, taking enemies' armor and also shields, and using her third ability, Shatter Shield, to reduce the incoming bullet damage by 95%. Keep that in mind, it is bullet damage, so melee enemies will basically kill you, so keep that in mind. Try to keep your distance, but of course you don't really have to because you have the Peacemakers. Yes, Mesa's fourth ability, allowing you to basically decimate everything and anything that is in front of you. Of course, we do need to have a build for Mesa, and this is what it looks like. We basically have somewhat mostly power strength focused build because of course Peacemakers and of course Pillage as well, just so we can remove the enemy's shields and armor more effectively. Basically in 2 activations we remove it completely, so keep that in mind. Range is not important at all because Pillage is of course scalable off of duration and not range, or I guess expands the further it expands further the longer it lasts. There you go. We do have duration, which is very important, as I said, and efficiency as well, because you're going to be using up a decent sum of energy, and plus you don't have any sort of energy mod, which is of course not really necessary. Mesa's Volts is a must-have in my opinion, but it really depends if you want to move around or not. Nonetheless, a pretty good augment mod to have. And we do have Arcane Velocity. On critical hit, it will give you 90% chance for 120% fire rate to pistols for 9 seconds. This is amazing because, of course, Peacekeepers. And whilst we're on that topic, the build looks like this. Pretty much plain and simple. Galvanized Diffusion, Lethal Torrent, Target Cracker, Pistol, Pestilence, Jolt, Creeping Bullseye, Heated Charge, and Galvanized Shot. Now, we went with Corrosive and Heat because, first of all, it mostly does impact damage. If we wanted it to do more slash, that means, of course, we need to put on Carnus Mandible or another different type of slash mod. Honestly, believe me, and as you can actually see in the gameplay, it is definitely not needed. The Galvanized Shot Plus helps out a lot because you're already applying 2 different status effects, so you're getting an increase of another 80 damage, which is very, very cool. Nonetheless, basically, with this Warframe, all you need to worry about is melee ranged enemies. Not acolytes, not Rax units, not heavy bombards, not heavy gunners, basically only melee units, and those are one of the easiest enemies to take care of. Plus, bring yourself a different melee weapon than the Glaive Prime. The Glaive Prime's okay, but maybe an Icon or something like that would be pretty good. If a group of melee enemies comes near you, just basically jump into the air, throw your Glaive Prime, kill them, or activate your 4, and that's pretty much it. Nonetheless, our number 4th Warframe is going to be Mesa Prime. Moving on to number 3. And at number 3, we have our beloved Toxic Queen, the Erin Prime. Now, Erin Prime is an interesting Warframe that it can kill everything, and with this build, I have literally died more times than I can count with Revenant than I had with Erin Prime. With this build that I use, the chances of you dying are pretty much 0 to none unless you're incredibly unlucky with your, I guess, spawns and then everything and enemies, but if you just play normally, you're not gonna have any issues. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you take a look at the build, you can see that of course we have Brief Respite, Rolling Guard, plain and simple. As I said, the only Warframe in today's video with shield gating involved, Regenerative Molt that you can of course regenerate health with, and also this is the ability that I use to recast or I guess gain my shields back. 2 other mods that you can use, Venom Dose or Contagion Cloud, either one of those 2 is pretty okay. Arcane Energized, Molt Augmented, and we do have Gloom Subsumed instead of Miasma. Now, why did I do that, and why did I Miasma in general? Miasma is an ability that is pretty good, but not the most scalable ability from her set. Well, that is going to be spores. Keeping your spores alive is not that hard. Keep your third active, have your second active for just health and speed, and I guess extra survivability, and basically have spores on a couple of enemies. In Steel Path, they're gonna spread incredibly fast. Now, with Toxic Lash, you don't have to aim at the actual spore nodes, you just basically have to strike the enemy with the melee weapon, and that is basically it. But nonetheless, spreading spores is incredibly easy with this build, and surviving is incredibly easy as well. As I said, I died more times with Revenant because of smooth brain moments. With this Warframe, you cannot die. Gloom is giving you health, Regenerative Mote is giving you health. We have Archon Shards, that one of them boosting the effectiveness of health orbs by 100%. 2 Archon Shards for an extra 300 health, 1 Archon Shard for extra 15% power strength, and 1 for 25% casting speed. So, if you die with Erin Prime, I think it's gonna be your mistake, because with this build, as I said, you cannot die. Of course, spores do incredible amounts of damage anyway, and you're gonna be killing enemies anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Miasma, as I said, in my honest opinion, in higher end level gameplay, at least level 200 and above, or even further beyond, is not going to be one of the most useful abilities. Definitely try to change my comments or in the, I guess, mind in the down below. Yes, you got what I said, but nonetheless, we are going to be moving on to the second Warframe on this list. At number 2, we have a resident sumo wrestler. It is, of course, Grendel. Now, Grendel is one of the most damaging and the most survivable Warframes in the game. Now, by damaging, of course, I mean he can basically decimate a really big group of enemies without not doing much, honestly, just rolling around and swallowing up some enemies, spewing them out, and then everything in a certain radius dies. Nonetheless, with his, of course, feast ability, he can feast up to 5 enemies and gain 250 armor per enemy swallowed up, totaling, of course, 1250 armor on his already base 1023, at least in my, of course, build. Now, second of all, Nourish, one of the best, if not the best ability in the helmet system, first of all. Second of all, it gives him a health boost, it gives him a damage boost, it gives viral damage to your weapons, it gives an energy multiplier as well, and a really good damage increase. Nourish is just incredible. This ability just is making him unkillable, alongside the 1000 armor that he has, plus the 1100, or actually 1250 that he gets from a full belly with feast, and also another 900 armor for 20 seconds that I have with Arcane Guardian. He is really unkillable. Nonetheless, Pulverize, his third ability, turns him into a ball, dealing a toxic damage, giving you health per second, and then reducing the enemy's armor in a certain area by 68%. Keep this in mind, this will rise up with Molt Augmented, which I do have equipped, and you will reduce enemies' armor left, right, and center. It will also ragdoll them, and in this, I guess, ball form, you can activate your first and your second ability, so Nourish and Feast, and also your fourth ability, Regurgitate. You spit out a ball, or I guess someone in your stomach, dealing toxin damage. Well, toxin damage is incredibly good with enemies that have no shields and no armor, and actually it doesn't really matter, it bypasses shields anyway, but it also reduces the enemy's armor by 102% in my case. So how does the build actually look like? This is what the build looks like. Now, I do have a full setup of course, Umbral mods, yes, but I don't actually have an Umbral former here, I just now noticed that, but basically, you don't need a lot with this Warframe. As you can see, my power strength is basically nothing. My efficiency is base, duration, base. All you need is just range. Now, you could boost up the damage a little bit. You can honestly, I think, even take out adaptation. I honestly think this is not really necessary for this Warframe. Duration would be a little bit better, but not to sacrifice power strength that much. So maybe narrow-minded, but I wouldn't honestly go for it. Nonetheless, as I said, Molt Augmented, Arcane Guardian, Corrosive Projection for enemy reduction, but Growing Power would be much better aura, but sadly I haven't put it on here. Nonetheless, the biggest issue of Grendel is, of course, going to be Eximus units. With their Overguard, they cannot be, I guess, moved away with her third ability, so you have to switch out of your third ability, kill them with weapons. You can, of course, reduce their armor, but you cannot ragdoll them or do, you know, sufficient amount of damage to actually kill them. So that is the only downside to this Warframe. Nonetheless, Grendel, our resident sumo wrestler that can decimate a lot of enemies, that is our second Warframe. Moving on to number 1. And at number 1, we of course have one of my favorite Warframes, actually the favorite Warframe for me to take inside of Steel Path. It is gonna be Necros Prime. Necros is a Warframe that cannot die unless you don't pay attention, like actually most Warframes in the game if you're playing Steel Path. But nonetheless, with this Warframe, first of all, you have Desecrate, extra loot, who doesn't love that? You have 90% damage reduction, you have armor reduction, you also have crowd controlling in the form of, well, first of all, Terrify, second of all, Gloom, which is subsumed instead of his first ability, Soul Punch. Now, Gloom, first of all, slows down enemies, gives you life steal, and Terrify reduces enemy armor by 100%, which is incredibly good. It can affect 39 enemies, again, really good, and they can't really run away from you because, you know, they're in a circle which slows them down to a crawling pace. So, and we have Desecrate, extra loot, as I said. We do have this Spoil, which uses, of course, health instead of energy, but we are gaining a lot of health through, first of all, Gloom, second of all, one of the mods that we have equipped, and damage reduction through Shadow of the Dead, and, of course, the Shield of Shadow's Augment. Now, the build that I'm using looks like this. As I said, Shield of Shadows and the Spoil, Equilibrium for health and also energy. I didn't max it out because it gives you 100% energy and 100% health, so it's basically 100%, but you can put that extra 1 level to gain. I think it's going to be 10%, but we do have Vitality. Umbral Vitality would be a little bit better, but sadly I didn't change out the slot. Now, with Shadows, or I guess Shield of the Shadows, you do get 11% damage reduction per enemy, I guess, summoned. Now, you get 8 enemies maximum, but keep this in mind, we do have Growing Power, which gives us a 25% increase for our ability strength and Molt Efficiency, which is basically going to increase that chance, and we're going to max out a 90% damage reduction instead of 88. Range is really important here, not the most important factor because, of course, strength and duration do have an equal say in the matter. Efficiency is honestly not that important. You might think, oh my god, you're going to literally kill yourself with Gloom's energy, I guess, consumption. No, you're not. You get a lot of health orbs through, of course, the Desecrate ability. Equilibrium is gonna give you energy. You're never going to run out of energy unless you get hit by a Leech Eximus that's gonna remove your, I guess, what's it called, energy, but other than that, you're not gonna run out of energy. Keep that in mind. Equilibrium really does save you in most of these situations. Honestly, Glue gives you health, and so does, of course, Desecrate, so you're not really worried about health either. Nonetheless, this is, as I said, one of my favorite Warframes to take into the Steel Path, actually the favorite Warframe to take into the Steel Path. Now, he is very dependent on his weapons, because his shadows are not going to, I guess, kill enemies, and nothing of his kit is going to kill enemies. But first of all, you have Terrify, reduce enemy armor, just pick a really good AoE weapon. Either one of the 3 weapons that I have is going to be incredibly good, and you're pretty much set and done. Nonetheless, this has been my 5 list. As I said at the beginning, I didn't want to make a typical list. I wanted to maybe put in some different Warframes that some people didn't really expect, but you know, it is, of course, to each their own. Nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed the list. If you guys did, do leave a like, comment down below which 5 Warframes you love taking into Steel Path, and do subscribe for more content. This has been your friendly neighborhood gaming weasel, and I'm over and out.